Well, hello there. I'm really excited to be meeting with Todd Sinclair. He's been an inspiration to me since reading his Rebel Vegan books. And, our focus here is looking at, the positive mind, body, spirit transformation that can come with a vegan lifestyle. And also, because being vegan is different than what the rest of the world, the majority of the world is doing just yet, even though plant-based is becoming so much more popular, it's still sometimes hard for those of us on the vegan path, wherever you are on that path, because we have to kind of pave the way. And so we'll be talking some about, Todd's journey as a vegan and, what helps and inspires him. So I'm going to just say a little brief introduction about him. He's a writer and a speaker. He specializes in vegan lifestyle and travel. And as I just mentioned, he is the best-selling author of the Rebel Vegan trilogy, which I really recommend. And, he also, I know, posts quite frequently on Instagram, some amazing posts that really help to highlight, why veganism matters. He, really has shown how vegan values are a fundamental way to avoid future pandemics, protect animals and the planet, travel sustainably, and take care of our health. So as we get started, Todd, first of all, thank you for being here. And
hello, thank you, Angela. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's nice to meet you properly. We've messaged back and forth, so it's an honor and a pleasure to be here. Hi, everyone.
Yes, awesome. So maybe the first thing that would be helpful is for you just to share a little bit about your vegan journey. What led you to become vegan? How did it come about? And how long ago was that?
Right. Well, it's kind of a convoluted, I always say I've kind of gone from one end of the spectrum to the other, because I was raised on Prince Edward Island and off the coast of Canada. And I was raised, my whole family, farmers. So I think most people, very few people are ever raised from birth or, as vegan. So we all come from households where we have to kind of, find our way, break out. Mine was just a little more maybe extreme in the sense that, my grandfather had one of the biggest dairy farms in that part of the world, or that part of Canada. So it was obviously very normalized. Part of some of my roles growing up was in the animal agriculture industry. And it very much was the way of the world to me. And I knew even as a child, there was things I didn't want to do or see, but I was so immersed in it. So that was my foundation in my upbringing. Now, I wanted to get out in the world, and I've traveled a lot and tried lots of things, but it took me a long time. And I think a lot of vegans share this. Their biggest regret is often, why didn't I do this earlier? Why didn't I find my way here earlier? It took me many, many years, and basically, leaving the farm, going out into the world, hearing about different cultures, ideas, diets. But it really wasn't until I got sick. I used to have a travel company and do tours throughout Southeast Asia, and a place I love. And I got very sick. I've got quite a strong, I've eaten everything and everywhere. And I got really sick with a severe form of it. It's a type of food poisoning. And I had to come off the road. And I, of course, as part of one of my tours, used to go to this monastery in the hills outside of Hue in sort of central North Vietnam. And we used to do motorcycle tours and stop there. And I got to know them, and we'd have a vegan lunch. And I was in that region, and I kind of limped my way there, and they took me in because they've known me for years, usually just for a quick lunch and goodbye. And they took me in and took it quite seriously and nurtured me back to health on a fully plant-based diet. Obviously, there'd be no animal products within that monastery walls. But it wasn't just that. Discussing with some of the novice monks issues around the diet itself was really a spiritual sense of it, that, not to have ingested or caused death. And that notion, and after growing up in a farm where it was just like, that's how food's produced, it was never something that was even a discussion. really hit me as well, because as I was nurtured back to health, within a week or two, I was feeling lighter. It was almost like you can feel like your blood feels, it flows easier. And all these things are happening. And some people could argue, was that placebo? I felt it. And so that's what this discussion was about. So if you think, I almost came to veganism because of a health crisis. So if people ask me often, how did you become a vegan? I say, well, I came for health, but I stayed for the animals. I stayed for ethics. I stayed for, all these important vegan values, I call. But that discussion with that novice monk, when he was saying, well, maybe you feel better and feel lighter, not just because of the nutritional aspect, but because of the spiritual aspect of it. And it really hit home. It was both of those things. I think a lot of us have this cognitive dissonance out there in the world, pre-vegans, let's call them, or people who, if they're sensitive people, they know, oh, there's something there that's uncomfortable, but let's just leave it because it's the way it is. And I don't want to challenge the status quo. Well, this really made me challenge the status quo. I mean, I was, sicker than I've ever been in my life, nurtured back on this plant-based diet, and I just felt better. And then I also felt that it was more in line with who I am. So I went back out into the world, and then I had to all of a sudden, find how to be a vegan. But that's kind of my origin story, going from one end of the spectrum to the other, from, literally a dairy farmer to this vegan author. Here I am, and there's a lot more there, but I don't want to keep going.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I think you said it was just how many years ago? It wasn't even that long ago.
It was 6 years ago.
6 years. Wow.
But not that long at all. And it wasn't like I was ever vegetarian. And Angela, this is the thing. And I mean, I'm embarrassed to say it. But growing up in a farm, when veganism, even vegetarianism 20 years ago, whatever, started coming on my radar, I was one of those people, not in a mean, malicious way, but I would make little jokes, out of ignorance. And and that's the thing. I always say, if I can do it, anybody can do it. Because like I say, I grew up with this, was normalized. And yes, I think normalized violence in a way was surrounding me. Growing up in a dairy farm, I could hear the calves crying. I saw animals go to slaughterhouse. That was there. I had to do things that I blocked out for a lot of years. Like there's a thing for baby, the calves to burn their horns before they grow, if you're going to have beef cattle. And they used to get me as a child to poke it, and they would have this calf, and I would I don't want to do this. And they're like, no, you have to just do 1, 2. Things like that, really things that came back to me as an adult when I was writing my books, the first vegan book. I almost woke up with flashbacks. So that's what I mean. I've come from that end of the spectrum, where this was just the most normalized way to be, to raise and to kill animals for humans, for our consumption, to being an outspoken vegan. And along the way, I would have thought, if you told me there's no way I couldn't imagine that I'd ever end up being a vegan and embrace it this fully. So it really is quite a journey.
Yeah, that is. It's amazing. And especially, like you say, with the upbringing, because as you say, it's normalized. And in fact, it's maybe even portrayed as like maybe a necessary evil. You might have a little empathy for the animals, but kind of, well, we have to do it. That's what we're taught.
That's it. And I was assured that, they were being well treated and all these things. And as we are now, more so. I mean, I grew up in that farm 30 years ago, 35, 40 years ago. I can remember where I live when I visit back on Prince Edward Island in Canada, this very farming area. All the fields were dotted with these black and white cows, these picture, and it's just beautiful. And now, and our farm as well, they were out to, we had fields for them to graze every day. The dog used to round them up twice a day to go into the milking machines, that kind of thing. But they're always outdoors. And now when I drive through my homeland, where the island I'm from, I remember asking my father and my mother in a car, saying, why are all the fields empty? And of course, my dad said, well, it's a new way. They've got them all. And there was all these prefabricated barns, like these big round, often barns. And he said, well, they don't go out and graze. They feed them in there. And of course, factory farming has advanced to that level, that where I grew up, that is just surrounded by open fields. All those fields are empty. and they're all
Yes.
indoors, and they can keep more of them and feed them more efficiently and fat them up and get them to market quicker. So even my farming, when I grew up, like I say, 35 years ago, seems like a lifetime ago, because things have gotten
Yeah.
more brutal. So that's even shocked me as well, you know?
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely. And I think there could probably be a whole conversation that's not part of ours.
yeah.
It's how hard I think that transition to factory farming is on small farmers.
Oh
It's
gosh, yes.
kind of
Yeah.
forced into this
Yeah.
big industry.
And,
And
and and I know
time.
my father even, and I've seen it, you know, some of the things I think he found hard to do. I think back now as an adult, and when I look
Mhm.
back at some of the discussions and some of the times, and my uncle as well, a few people, members of my family would, you know, they obviously really worry and care for the animals. Now they were a product, and there was a financial element to it. But you know, I remember my father staying up all night with horses and racing home from if there was a calf being born, you know, so worried about the health of it. Now that was for money, but also, you know, he I know that he was sad sometimes, and he about things he had to do. I could see that. I could see it written on his face. So it's the new harsher, you know, industrialized farming as it's become more brutal. That is not
Yes.
easy on a lot of farmers whose family's done it. My family's done it for I don't know how many generations, maybe six, seven
Yes.
generations. They settled that land in Canada when they came from a ship from Scotland and, you know, took down the trees and started farming. So there's such a rich heritage, yet it's become so much uglier. And,
Mhm.
you know, and I hate to
Yeah.
even use the word abuse, and I use it once when I talk about my upbringing on a
Yes.
farm. And I say, you know,
Yes.
I had to be careful because there's a really sensitive thing for me to write about. But I said, you know, I grew up around normalized violence and abuse. I remember the
Yes.
sounds, I remember the smells. And and that's a really, you know, horrible thing to have to subject on anyone. But I found my way, and here I am, feeling happy and
Yes.
healthier
Yeah.
with myself and my
Well,
beliefs.
so, well, since becoming vegan, I'd be really interested in hearing some of the changes that have happened for you, both health-wise, obviously that was the first, and then in terms of maybe some of the other changes in your life that have unfolded since becoming vegan, health-wise, mental health-wise, purpose,
Yeah.
share a little bit about that.
Well, it really is one of the passions, you know, because to me, I often say it's opened up my world in many ways. I enjoy food more.
Mhm.
My health is better. I had a whole blood test. I don't know, it was a couple of years ago now, but you know, when they check everything, your vitamin D and your this and your that, and my cholesterol was down, everything, they were like, wow, you know, and I kind of done it because I hadn't done it in many years. And you know, I travel around the world and do, you know, sometimes I'm not eating the perfect healthy diet. It's a
Mhm.
vegan diet, but it could be something from a junk food store. So,
Mhm.
and they said, no, your cholesterol's down, everything's good, And I had problems in the past with cholesterol when I was, you know, in my 30s and early 40s. So I
Wow.
was really, really pleased. So health-wise, there is that, but also there's this sense that finally I had lived with this cognitive dissonance all my life. And I didn't even know
Yes.
the name of it. I didn't have a title,
Yes.
but
Yes.
I knew that even like from the farm and things I blocked out, I knew there are
Yes.
elements even of that type of farming that wasn't as industrialized that I was uncomfortable.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yet I went into the world and I wanted to try and taste everything, and I did. But then when I broke it down and realized, you know, that this aligns with who I really am. You know, I've always, there's no way you could, you know, they couldn't have dragged me to one of the slaughterhouses when I was a child. Thankfully, they didn't. But I knew this was more about what, you know, when I learned, I started doing the research. The first thing when I came back out of that monastery is like, I got a book. I got Peter Singer's his name. And it was an old dusty book. And I read that. I started researching, going, oh my God, this has been here. I can't believe I've not seen this information. I realized health-wise, I didn't need it. I could be better. And I felt, and because I felt better, it was almost like the science was going, wow, there is a, you know, this is real. And
Mhm.
then I, of course, I always felt that finally I'm my authentic self. It's like coming home, I said, you know, in the sense that I've been ignoring this thing and looking away and keeping my head in the sand for a long time. Just thinking, this is the way of the world, meat and dairy. And all of a sudden it was like, wow, I'm me now. This is who I am. My beliefs, I live by my beliefs. I don't ignore little bits I don't like and look away. So that's a really powerful thing, I think, generally, and something I wanted to share. And I didn't want to be, necessarily, preaching or ramming it down people's throats, but, friends and everybody else and family, I think we lead by example. And I feel and look healthier, and I'm in a better state mentally, physically, spiritually, I think. And that in itself inspires other people, and they want to ask questions. Sometimes they're a bit defensive, like, gosh, how, that also they have their own cognitive dissonance that they might be fighting. But if they're open to it, wow, that's a great discussion to be able to inspire or help someone along the way, which is, I know what you're doing as well, Angela.
Well, thank you. And well, first of all, I am inspired by what you're sharing, and I really relate to so much of it. I grew up in the Midwestern United States, Iowa, which was farm country, surrounded by farms. And although my parents weren't farmers, they ran a small grocery store. I definitely had the message that we needed meat and dairy to survive. And, in fact, I think I almost made sure I had meat at almost every meal, and, tried to get my milk that I thought I needed, So
I've done similar. We used to have glasses of milk, big glasses of milk, put that down. And it just boggles my mind now that was, and I think, I don't think we should blame necessarily our parents. That was rammed down their throat by our governments, who were putting on, at that time, on all the kind of remember the plate where they broke it up, you needed that much protein, that much calcium. And meat and dairy were the center of the guidelines. Now that has changed slowly and not successfully. But at that stage, our parents would have thought, get more milk in them, make their body stronger. And of course, the reverse is true. So the science,
all of the authorities were teaching that as needed to do, and many people believed it themselves, obviously, and
still do. And that's the scary thing.
Exactly.
I saw my younger sisters when I visited Canada. I'm in London now, and I was visiting Canada, for their young children, because they were brought up that way, getting little glasses of milk and putting them on the table. And I did have to kind of say, there's a lot of science in now, and I didn't want to have to be too confrontational. There's a way of doing it. But by saying, can I send you some more information? And it's not just my, propaganda. This is like, peer-reviewed studies, the most recent. And have to think about that. There's other ways to get them calcium and to make sure they're strong, and better ways. So getting the word out.
So, from what you're saying, one of the things that really struck me as I was on my journey from vegetarianism to veganism is that message of like, no other mammal drinks milk from another species, and no other mammal drinks milk past weaning age. And that just really struck me, like, why have I been taught I need I can get milk, my calcium from the same place that any herbivore or
exactly, Angela. And I always think the animal's just the middleman. And in every, it's always best to cut out the middleman and go straight to the source. And I don't even want to belittle, the animals are, been living in these horrible conditions and torture, but they are just the middleman, whether it's protein or calcium or whatever the heck it is. And that's the thing. You're right. This with the milk, they're kind of this incredible. I think it's almost a little creepy, weird that we are taking the lactosing juices of another mammal and giving them to our young. And there's all the evidence now shows that that's a bad thing and bad for so many things. And I always say, let's have milk made for humans. And to me, my fridge, it has a barrister oat milk for coffee and tea, and it'll have some no sugar almond milk. And that to me is milk made for humans, not milk made for cows.
I totally got it.
Break there. We shouldn't be doing this. It's So I think that's getting through actually to a lot of the younger generations, and I'm really pleased to see that.
Yeah, no, that is so true. Yeah, and so as you're on this vegan journey, and so it sounds like, your health is improving, mentally you're feeling better. And I can also relate to what you said about feeling more authentically you. I know for me, as I became vegetarian and then vegan, there was a sense of freedom, like, oh, wow, this thing that probably at some core level I've always known, but not wanted to see, I'm now acknowledging and acting in alignment with the
Yeah.
values I have around this, that I don't want to harm animals. And, and that includes all animals.
Yeah, and that's so powerful. It really is, and I think similar to me when I finally and it just opened up my world so much because I felt stronger when I navigated anything. When I would be at a restaurant, I knew my stuff. I knew what I shouldn't put in my body. And I was able to communicate that because at first I was really nervous. I thought I'll be seen as extreme, or I'll somehow, this will be so hard for me to go out into the world. But you know what? Kind of the reverse. I remember right in Asia, after I came out of that, out of the monastery there, and I went back into Wei, the city I was outside of. Sun's coming out here in London, and basically went to some of these restaurants who know me because I've taken tours through there many, many times. That might be too bright. Taking tours there many times. And they were excited to give me, my favorite dish, and they were running to the kitchen. Of course, those were all often meat-based dishes. I had to say and talk to them, and I was worried about that. And they came and sat with me. I remember the chef and the waiter, because I've known them, professionally for years, and sat down at my little table and explained my journey and explained why and explained how I felt. And they were so accepting and so responsive because I was being me. I was being authentic, and I was passionate about it.
Yes.
It wasn't like, oh, I had to do this because the doctor said, or I had to do it for health. It was like, I did this. And now I'm feeling all these benefits. I'm feeling more myself, more aligned with my beliefs, spiritually stronger. My health is so much better. And they responded so well also because, I think their Buddhist belief in a lot of parts of those world. The meats almost come in more and more over the last 20, 30 years with the development of a lot of those cultures. So they even have a strong history of it. But anyway, it was just me feeling empowered. And I could relay that message in a very honest way without it, avoiding, it being confrontational, or there's one way to live your life. Just kind of explaining how I benefited from it. So it was really, really powerful. I felt stronger, and it's good. I think a lot of vegans say that, like I say, and it's a very similar story to yours.
Yes. Well, and you're naming something that can be a challenge for many vegans on their vegan journey, as people are entering into becoming vegan or trying it out. And then as they continue it, one of the things I hear the most from people is the social aspect is hard for many people. Yeah. And, depending on how much we are kind of people pleasers, where we want, to keep harmony, or we don't want to disrupt things. For those that are more like that, it's even harder, I think, than maybe the more extroverted kind of, I do things my way kind of person. And so I love what you're sharing, because I think this idea of being authentic and heart-centered as we're sharing why we've changed. And it sounds like you weren't sharing it in a way that tried to shame the other person. It was more like your own journey. And
Absolutely.
Just sort of like, to be real, I have to tell this person my journey so that when I'm coming to this restaurant, they know how to feed me and they can feel good too, because they obviously took pride in sharing their food with you. And so you made it like a situation where they knew how to support you. And
I think so, yeah. And I think it's a trust thing, like they actually took me right into the kitchen, and we went through the kitchen, and I explained what I could and couldn't eat, and what was vegan and what wasn't vegan. And then they got so proud, and they want to be, so many people, they want, if something's new to them, especially working in the service industry and things like that, they wanted to hear, they wanted to know, they wanted to be part of this. They said, okay, this is happening. We've heard that name a few times. We're like, and all of a sudden, I had a few restaurants. I almost started veganizing parts of Southeast Asia. And I would come back, and they would get excited. Sometimes they would run on the street, we've got something, come. And they made this new vegan, and they put on the menu, fully plant-based or vegan, or, they put something on the menu. They wanted to learn, they wanted to engage, they wanted to be part of the world and what's happening. And I said, this is an important movement. And hopefully we're going to see a lot more of it. And that I found in lots of places I visited throughout that region, in Cambodia and Thailand and Laos and Myanmar. They were like, okay, thank you for, chatting to us. What can we do? And I said, well, get at least one thing on your menu, first thing, that says on it, fully plant-based. And they might have already had something accidentally, and I said, great, we'll put on it. Or they might have had a couple things. And I said, well, even think of something new now. This is a challenge. This is like, what can I do that's really tasty, that takes in the flavors of our country? And we can put on our menu and say, this is cruelty-free, fully plant-based, vegan. That's a wonderful thing. So I've seen that change in the last 5-6 years, dramatically. And I think just by inspiring people, like for instance, I had a group here, I had 10 people for Christmas, in the end it was 12 people for Christmas dinner. And there's only 1 or 2 vegans, maybe 1 vegetarian. The rest were, carnivores or omnivores. And some of them were nervous. I had a friend, Bernie, who came with I told everybody, bring something vegan if you like, or don't. I had this vegan roast that I got at Marks and Spencer's here, and it was just so good. And I made lots of vegan stuffing and stuff. Anyway, people were a bit anxious, had a big table. I put all these little tables together, and I made a toast at the start of the meal. And I said, I thank you all for being here, for being my London family, my chosen family. And I said, also, all of you should feel a bit lighter today and good, because everything you're going to eat today, none of it involved any cruelty. No being had to lose a life today for this incredible feast we have in front of us. And I said, cheers, enjoy. And it went down so well. I had friends saying, well, that's a turning point for me, because I brought a secret stash in my bag of things I could eat in case this was so terrible. So my fully vegan, animal, cruelty-free Christmas went down so well. I even had lots of little vegan cheeses, and people were like, I didn't think you could get that. So that, just by doing it in that gentle way, I didn't want to even challenge them in the toast, but I wanted to bring it up. We should all feel good about this, and I bet you we're going to feel better afterwards for it, and we can carry that.
I give you that was a great way to do that. And it sounds like then the food itself showed people that, wow, not only is this doable, this is could actually be delicious.
Yes, absolutely. It was just so sumptuous and wonderful. There's so much of everything, and also it was, wow, yeah, okay. Usually my Christmas does involve likely a lot of death, and a big bird being killed, and the other bits of sides, and there's rolls with bacon. Nothing was killed. Everything.
No, that is so beautiful. And what you described about your world opening up when you became vegan and enjoying food more, I had that experience too. I was not a cook before becoming vegan at all, and I ate convenience foods, comfort foods, microwave dinners. Whatever I did cook was pretty limited. And when I became vegan, or first vegetarian and then vegan, I bought, plant-based cookbooks, and I just found this whole world just opened up, and now that there's also more options when you eat out, really delicious.
Isn't that wonderful to see? And I've seen it in the last even 5 years, but wow, it's dramatically changed. I don't consider myself, one of my books does have cooking recipes. I worked on a vegan chef with it, because I knew I didn't have those skills myself. I've got my one kind of go-to dish, my jackfruit curry, which I'm quite famous for. Any friend has eaten it many times, but it's definitely opened up my world and my taste buds, because I think a lot of meat eaters, especially growing up in the standard Western diet, it's very lazy. You got meat at the center of the plate, really, and your potatoes and veg or whatever it might be. But, it's not that exciting. And all of a sudden, and Asia helped me with that as well, to be honest, traveling through Asia with all those incredible, flavors. And, but definitely it opened up my taste buds. And then I wanted to cook. When I got back to London, I couldn't wait to go down those, plant-based aisles or vegetarian and vegan aisles and explore and try all these different things. Like even a Beyond Burger was a, revelation to me. So I'll be thinking it definitely, now I like cooking more. I spend more time on it. And I do experiment with flavors. And I think I've said to you, even with my travel, it's opened up my world. And people said, how can you travel as a vegan? And, you know, it has its own things. There's some preparation and things you should have or do. But I said, if anything, like I'll go to I was in Asia just last month, and I went to a little town and I found a little vegetarian vegan restaurant. And all of a sudden they were intrigued by me, and I was meeting my people, you know, and I was asking questions. Oh, well, there was this restaurant also has really good vegan, and go down to the next town and you can get some. And it was almost like, you know, we're a community. I found my tribe. And I'm
Yes.
more authentic, like we said earlier, we're both kind of found after all the cognitive dissonance and the internal kind of, you know, ignoring things in your life, you are living in alignment with your full beliefs. No one can challenge you on that. And you can go out in the world and you can connect with people more authentically and deeply.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what's happened to me as a vegan. So traveling the world as a vegan, I mean, that's why I wrote the whole book about it, my whole Rebel Vegan Travel Guide, is that
Yes.
I said, there are special strategies and tips and techniques, but there's so much to benefit. I wanted to encourage people. Veganism, it doesn't have to be restrictive. I said it's the opposite to that. To me, it opens up your world in so many ways, whether it's going out into the world or just finding new ways to cook and to create amazing flavors and to feel better about yourself. So
Yes.
it's been quite a journey.
Awesome. No, I love that. And this is a perfect time to kind of segue now to talk about your books. You know, first, could you share, like, how did it come about that, you know, you, who at that time was a fairly new vegan, you know, maybe 3 years into your vegan journey or
Yeah,
something?
likely three. And it, you know, well, COVID happened.
Yeah. So tell us
Obviously,
how did you come about writing these books, 3 books?
well,
So,
the first COVID enabled me and gave me the space. We here in the UK, I had to come back from Asia. I was working on the road in Asia and veganizing huge swathes of Southeast Asia, having a wonderful time. And I was actually in Myanmar, right on the border of China, when the news started coming through about this, you know, COVID pandemic. And I was like, gosh, so I had to get everybody home. And it was all very confusing, but I came home and I had already on the Mekong River while I was working, one of those tours, I was saying, a travel guide, a vegan travel guide. And I didn't have any paper. I was literally 2 days on a slow boat in the Mekong River between Thailand and Laos. And I got on my iPhone and on my notes, I started writing ideas in an outline for this vegan travel book, or how to pack the perfect vegan suitcase. And I had all these ideas anyway. And I was literally writing, and I spent the whole day, you know, just gently cruising a lot through, swirling around the Mekong. And that was there, but I never did anything with it. I think I added a few things over time, but my life was just busy and, you know, I didn't have the time. And then COVID happened, shunted back here kind of, you know, to the UK, had to find a place to live because my flat was rented out, but I had all this time. And I said, well, let's look at this book. And I realized it needed more than that, because veganism to me, I looked at what was out there. I did a publishing course as well, a publishing and writing course at the first lockdown. So I was doing a writing course. I got a credit from Yale University. I was very proud of that. So I did all this background, and I've always loved writing anyway, and had a few things published in travel journals. So I said, let's put my travel guide just to the side. Because if I'm going to do this, there's a lot of vegan books out there, but a lot of them are dated. And I wanted to do you know, a deep dive into veganism with everything that was happening in the world. Because to me, COVID highlighted so many vegan values, whether it's about the environment, about your health and your immunity. You know, it's been shown that, you know, and then even about pandemics itself and zoonotic, you know, zoonotic plagues that leap from one species to the other. Well, that's what we've been suffering for. And that's because of our treatment of animals, whether in industrialized farming or markets. So I realized that it really was connected. So I put the travel book on the side, and I started writing this one book that's going to be like why veganism matters. And I got outlines together, and that's when some of my memories were coming back. I was writing all day alone, in isolation. And then I would go to bed and I would remember things about growing up, sounds and things I did when I was a child, really. And that was interesting and really informed the book. And because it's kind of my story, as well as me doing all the research about all the latest scientific or journals and research. And then that even became 2 books, because I realized I wanted to do the why and the how. So the Why Veganism Matters was the first book, Radical Take on Veganism. And then I did a separate one with a plant-based nutritionist on the how, the plant-based nutrition guide, because I realized it was going to be one book, and I realized they both, to do them justice, needed to be their own individual books.
Wow.
So all of a
Wow.
sudden, coming from my travel guide, I started writing the first book that became two books. The poor travel guide was left to the very end of lockdown. But
Yes.
so anyway, I wrote these books through lockdown. I did the research. I was phoning people even up, other vegan people who I thought had something to say. I was like, just doing all the research to write it. So I had the first book, the Why Veganism Matters, and then the plant-based nutrition guide, how to do it. And then my travel guide finally got to that, where to go as a vegan. So the why, the how, and the where, I always say. So it was so good picking up the travel guide and coming back to the original and getting my photos in there and my travel stories. And it was just, listen, COVID, was devastating in lots of ways, but it also made us rethink things, and gave us an opportunity to rethink things. And for me, it was really much about rethinking, resetting, and starting a whole new life. I said, I love travel, but it'll be years before that comes back. So maybe I can inspire people to get, to in a different way. And that to me was through veganism. And I decided that's where my voice would be.
Well, that's amazing. So the first book, name the title of it, the Rebel Vegan.
The Rebel Vegan, the Why Veganism Matters, and I wish I had a different title now, is this one. It's a radical veganism for a brave new world, which kind of emphasizes the new world post pandemic and how we take the lessons and build a bit better life. So it's a deep dive. My story about growing up in a farm and sticking my head in the sand for many years is in there as well. And the next one is the how, the plant-based nutrition guide. And that goes through everything about all the health implications of a meat diet and how you can help them. And then it has recipes at the back. So I've got tons of my, I've got my jackfruit curry in there as well.
Oh, awesome. I'll have to look more closely at that now.
My one that I finally got to is my travel guide, Veganism on the Go, which has all my favorite destinations and tips and packing advice. And it's got also, actually, I put in some of my little travel recipes on the back. So little easy recipes. So it's, there's one other vegan travel guide out there, My Lonely Planet, and I've nearly surpassed them with reviews. And so I'm like, okay, I know my book is more recent, and I know, well, it sounds very ego, but I think it's a better book. It's a more up-to-date book. So I'm really promoting my travel guide because it's the last one out, and I didn't have the energy at the time because I just published two. And I've kind of updated it, and I really want to give it the love and time it needs to promote it and get it out there in the world. So it's been quite a journey, but
and can people
the book.
Can people order your books on Amazon, or where do they order your books?
Amazon is likely most everybody has Amazon. Just put in my name or Rebel Vegan. You'll find all three of my books. And they're in hardback, softback, they're an ebook, and I have audiobooks of the first two. I need to do that travel guide. I want to voice it myself. So I need to get into the studio. There's a whole process, everything takes time.
No, that's amazing.
They're also Ingram Sparks in the United States. I think you can get them at a lot of the other ones as well, because Ingram Sparks, I think it puts them out to Books, etc., Barnes and Noble, things like that. So you can find them most places if you just search my brand, Rebel Vegan, or my name. So, and let me know. I love feedback. Get in touch on my website. Let me know what you think, if there's things you think that should be included. I always do updates and love to hear from people.
Well, I've read the first two, and now I have to get the second. And I think I really would like to order them all in a paperback copy, because I have the two on Kindle, and I'd like to have the physical copy, because looking at recipes and things like that are easier when
it's so much easier. And I think they just sit nice on a shelf as well. I've got a lot of my books.
They're beautiful. And so much admiration as someone who's working on a book for you, having completed this, and in the 3 books and in the time frame you did. I mean, I feel like my book, I've been incredibly slow, but listen,
and I took the first book took a lot of time. It took
There's a lot
months,
of research in there. You
a
have
lot
so
of
much
research, and I
yeah.
wanted it to be found, the foundation of it to be strong. I didn't want it, that was really important
Yes.
to me. And then listen, and that took me a long time. I have a really good editor. And I think every writer, needs that. Not just like to check the spellings and the grammar, but to actually say, well, this goes on too long, or this needs to be cut.
Yes,
This needs
yes,
more. I needed that developmental editor. So they listen, without them,
yes,
I couldn't have done this to the, I wanted a really high quality, and I know yours will be as well,
yes.
professional, high quality book. I didn't want it to be, second rate in any way. So that editor, the whole process, having an editor, and I had a proofreader and an editor and all these other people who take what you've done and kind of fine tunes it. That's part of the process as well, Angela. And I think,
Yeah.
you'll be surprised how much they bring it together.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and I just having read, the first two books and soon to read the travel, one of the things that struck me about your first book, about the why of veganism, you really touched on things that hadn't yet been touched on because, obviously the pandemic was new, so yes, about pandemics and how that relates to what we eat. And as you mentioned, the zoonotic diseases. You also touched on some things about, just some, what workers go through,
Yeah, the social impact of meat. Like,
processing.
yeah,
Yes.
that really surprised people, because that's often, often the three big things, obviously, is your own personal, your health, the environment,
Mhm,
and ethics, animal welfare. They're kind of the three pillars of veganism in a way.
mhm,
And I said there's a fourth one. People who work in this industry, and that was, where that chapter came from. I was, of course, online every day researching anything about
mhm,
veganism or anything
mhm.
about. And there was some exposés during the COVID lockdowns, because in the United States, they kept all the slaughterhouses or the meat packing
Yes.
plants open. They said they were an essential service, but of course, and they became COVID super spreader locations.
Yes.
So there were some investigations. There was a famous one, I think 2021 or 2020 or whatever, in the New York Times, about the conditions that these people work in. Well,
Yes.
and
Yes.
there's been a study out that they suffer PDS, post-traumatic shock
Yes. Yeah.
from working there. There's higher incidence of violence in their communities, domestic violence.
Yes.
This is people who are, no one does this because they want to.
No. No.
They're doing it because they're usually often, illegal immigrants, poor. They're shoved out of cities and they live in communities outside of towns because no one wants a slaughterhouse near their precious
Yes.
town. So they're
Yeah.
living in little isolated places in the middle of nowhere, killing every day or being part of that
Yes.
process. It's traumatic, and it's a real social it's a real social issue. And
Yes.
I think that surprised people, and most people responded well. A few people were like, well, wait a minute, we shouldn't worry about
Mhm.
them. They're killing all the animals. I'm like, well, we should. You
Yeah. It's
know,
part of a
they're
system.
they're part of it as
Yes.
well. And this is all that's been left to them, and we've made them work kind of behind fences and high walls and
Yes.
isolated them.
Yes. No,
So
and I really resonated with that because actually, when I first became vegetarian, it was actually watching a program on PBS about workers in a meat processing plant, as they called it, and the conditions they worked in and kind of the injustice, and that they were often injured from the type of work they were doing, but yet because they were often either immigrants or just economically,
yeah.
you know, not having strong economic background, that they could have a voice, and that just struck me like, oh, what am I supporting here? And that's what got me thinking about the whole process of how my food
Oh,
got to me.
wow. Oh, you came at it
Yeah.
through that way. What an interesting,
Yeah. And then
I've
it
never
led
heard
to me
anybody with
thinking
that
about the
story.
animals. If I'm like concerned about the workers, what do you think it's like for the animals? And it just led to this
Yeah.
whole awakening process.
Yeah. There's so many different ways to come at it. I think almost driving forces for veganism, and
Yes.
people can find their own. And I try to
Yes.
say that in my first book. So there might be one thing that really resonates with you, and that might be the
Yes.
environment. That's your passion. Well,
Yes.
wonderful. Well, if you're a serious environmentalist, you really need to be a vegan.
Yes.
Otherwise, I
Yes.
don't even take
And
you
really
seriously.
learn.
And learn, yeah, the impact that the animal agriculture has on the environment. So, and whether it is the social welfare impact of, how can we condone the way they're being treated in that industry, because they can just be shoved to
Yes.
the outskirts of society.
Yes.
and or the more classic ones about your health, or about
Yes.
obviously the big one, the ethics of it all, which is hard
Yes.
as well. So there's so many ways to come towards it, and I think you find your what resonates with you, and then the others fit in, and you start educating. That's what I did. I came really because I'm health
Yes.
like this, and then I started reading, and I was going, okay, I've been ignoring this all my life. Some of the ethical issues,
Yes.
I've just thought,
Yes.
wow. Um,
Yes.
it's a pretty powerful stuff. And then to come out the other
Yes.
side and to realize you are making a difference, you're contributing, and you're
Yes.
helping to inspire other people to bring about
Yes.
change.
Yes. Oh, so true. Well, so people find you where? Just say briefly.
Yeah.
Connect with
Well, to
you.
get my website is www. Rebel Vegan Life, rebelveganlife.com. Come find
Okay.
me there. That has all the links to everywhere. It has the links to my books. It has the links to my social media. I'm Rebel Vegan Life on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and everything else.
Um,
And then you find my books on Amazon, or I believe they're in Barnes and Nobles and Books, etc., wherever. But yes, I'd love to engage with readers. So let me know, please, everyone, what you think.
yes. Oh, I love it. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me. I know you have a busy life, and I
Sure.
just really
Oh,
appreciate this. And I know it'll be helpful to those that listen, as well as, this is also sort of part of my book research too. And so I really appreciate that your story, is helpful as I'm fleshing out the details of my book to understand the experience that you've had as a vegan, in your
well,
journey.
I'm proud to be part of it, because it sounds like, from our discussion, an incredible, well-needed book. So anything I could do, would be honored. Yeah. And good luck with all of that. It's a big
Well,
process.
thank you. And thank you to anyone and all who are listening, and take care. Talk later.
Bye.